In 1870, an ordinary bookkeeper controlled 4% of American oil. By 1880, he dominated 90%. This created a system so powerful that you now live inside its hidden architecture every single day. The invisible blueprint shaping our modern existence began with a man born to unusual parents, the son of a traveling snake oil salesman and a deeply religious Baptist mother. This strange combination produced John D. Rockefeller, a figure who would transform the business landscape by merging ruthless efficiency with the almost religious belief that competition was wasteful and sinful. When petroleum was discovered in Pennsylvania, most people rushed to drill in a wild, chaotic frenzy. Rockefeller saw a different opportunity, not in the uncertain gambling of drilling, but in the predictable business of refining. This strategic insight became the first building block in what would grow into the most dominant economic empire America had ever witnessed. Instead of joining the drilling madness, Rockefeller methodically constructed a system based on calculated control. His first revolutionary tactic was vertical integration, owning every step in the supply chain. While his competitors purchased wooden barrels from independent makers, Rockefeller acquired forests and built his own barrel factories. When others paid premium rates to ship oil by railroad, he invested in his own tank cars and eventually his own pipelines. This comprehensive approach reduced his costs far below what any rival could achieve. If a competitor paid 25 cents per barrel, Rockefeller made his for just 15 cents. This cost advantage allowed him to introduce predatory pricing, the ability to sell products at prices that would destroy competitors while still generating profits for himself. But efficiency alone could not satisfy Rockefeller's vision of complete market control. In 1872, he executed what became known as the Cleveland Massacre, a brutally effective strategy of horizontal consolidation. Within just 3 months, he approached every refinery owner in Cleveland with what seemed like an opportunity, but was really an ultimatum: sell to Standard Oil at a fair price or face certain destruction. The mechanics were coldly efficient. When refinery owners refused his offer, Rockefeller would flood their specific market with artificially cheap petroleum, selling below cost until they faced bankruptcy. Then, with calculated precision, he would acquire their assets at auction for pennies on the dollar. By the end of this 3-month campaign, Rockefeller controlled 25 of Cleveland's 26 refineries. His market share jumped from 4% to 25% nationwide. But here is where the story takes a fascinating turn. His most powerful weapon was not just predatory pricing. It was his manipulation of transportation infrastructure through secret railroad agreements. Because Standard Oil shipped such enormous volumes, Rockefeller forced railroad tycoons like Vanderbilt to provide him hidden discounts. Even more shocking, he negotiated drawbacks, arrangements where railroads actually paid Rockefeller a percentage of the shipping fees collected from his competitors. In essence, he was being paid by the railroads to allow his rivals to remain in business. But only until he decided their time was up. As Standard Oil expanded across state lines, it hit a significant legal obstacle. In the 19th century, corporations were prohibited from owning property or stock in other states. Rather than accepting this limitation, Rockefeller's legal team invented an entirely new corporate structure: the trust. In 1882, the Standard Oil Trust was formed, consisting of 41 shareholders who held stock in dozens of seemingly separate companies across multiple states in trust. This revolutionary arrangement allowed Rockefeller to maintain centralized control over what appeared to be independent businesses, effectively hiding the true scope of his monopoly. This trust structure is the direct ancestor of today's holding companies like Alphabet, Google's parent, and Meta, Facebook's parent. Entities specifically designed to centralize power while diffusing liability and regulatory oversight. By 1904, Rockefeller's dominance reached staggering proportions, controlling 91% of all oil production and 85% of final sales. But public opinion was turning against the robber barons of the Gilded Age. Investigative journalist Ida Tarbell published a devastating expose detailing Standard Oil's predatory tactics, fueling public outrage. This mounting pressure culminated in the landmark 1911 Supreme Court decision, that ordered Standard Oil broken into 34 separate companies. The public celebrated what they believed was the defeat of a monopolistic dragon. They were completely wrong. This apparent defeat actually marked Rockefeller's most brilliant strategic pivot. As a major shareholder in the original trust, he now owned significant stakes in all 34 new companies, including what would become ExxonMobil's Chevron and Amoco. When society transitioned from kerosene lighting to automobile transportation, demand for gasoline exploded. The supposedly competing companies became even more valuable. Rockefeller's personal wealth tripled, making him the world's first billionaire with a fortune that would exceed $400 billion in today's terms. What has happened since is even more remarkable. Over the past century, those 34 companies have gradually reconsolidated. Exxon and Mobil are now one entity. Chevron has absorbed numerous former Standard Oil components. The monopoly never died. It simply adapted and evolved. Rockefeller understood that being the richest man alive was dangerous if you were also the most hated. His final masterstroke was establishing the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913. This accomplished three critical objectives simultaneously. First, it provided tax avoidance by moving wealth into a tax-exempt entity he still controlled. Second, it transformed his public image from ruthless monopolist to generous philanthropist. Third, and perhaps most significantly, it gave him unprecedented influence over public policy. The Rockefeller Foundation fundamentally reshaped American medicine, education, and agriculture, standardizing medical education around a pharmaceutical model that favored the very chemical and oil-derived products his companies produced. This established the philanthrocapitalism template, now followed by modern billionaires from Gates to Zuckerberg. Looking at today's economy reveals the Rockefeller blueprint operating at scales he could only have imagined. Amazon represents the digital reincarnation of Standard Oil, employing identical strategies of vertical integration by owning not just the marketplace, but the cloud servers warehouses planes and delivery vehicles. Like Rockefeller, Amazon has practiced predatory pricing, willingly losing money for years to capture market share and eliminate competition. Google's 92% dominance in search exceeds even Standard Oil's peak market control. Structured under Alphabet, Google operates as a modern trust, obscuring its total market power by housing diverse ventures from healthcare to autonomous vehicles under one umbrella. The pharmaceutical industry exemplifies Rockefeller's strategy of regulatory capture, the process where corporations gain enough influence to effectively write their own regulations. Just as Rockefeller shaped railroad laws to benefit Standard Oil, pharmaceutical companies now fund regulatory agencies and secure patent extensions that prevent competition from more affordable generic medications. The banking sector operates as a coordinated oligarchy using the holding company structure pioneered by Rockefeller. Institutions like J.P. Morgan Chase and Bank of America have consolidated the power of thousands of local banks into a handful of impenetrable financial fortresses. What makes the Rockefeller system so enduring is its undeniable efficiency. Before Standard Oil, kerosene was prohibitively expensive and often dangerous. Rockefeller reduced prices by 80% while standardizing quality. Similarly, today you receive Amazon packages in 24 hours. Google search results in milliseconds, and the convenience of global banking networks. The trade-off for this efficiency is the extreme concentration of wealth and power. The modern economy extracts a small tax from virtually every transaction in your daily life. When you pump gas, purchase medicine, swipe a credit card, or click on a search ad, fractions of pennies flow upward through vertically integrated holding companies to the modern trustees who control this system. We now live in what appears to be a world of abundant choice, but this diversity is largely an illusion. You may select from multiple brands of toothpaste, but they are ultimately owned by two parent companies. You might choose between various gas stations, but the petroleum comes from three Standard Oil descendants. Your smartphone apps all run on just two operating systems. The genius of Rockefeller's legacy is not just the wealth it generated, but the comprehensive blueprint it established. He recognized that controlling society's fundamental structures, laws, supply, chains educational standards, and financial instruments creates a system that perpetuates power without requiring direct intervention. The monopolistic architecture he designed has become so thoroughly embedded in our economic landscape that we can no longer see its boundaries. John D. Rockefeller died in 1937, but his influence today exceeds what he achieved in his lifetime. His method has evolved from controlling oil to commanding the digital infrastructure, pharmaceutical development, global finance, and information access that define modern existence. You cannot opt out of this system any more than you can choose not to breathe the atmosphere. However, understanding this architecture is the first step toward navigating it more consciously. When you recognize a corporation absorbing competitors or capturing regulators, identify it as a Rockefeller strategy in action. Where possible, diversify your dependencies by supporting local systems and decentralized alternatives. And perhaps most pragmatically consider that, in a system designed to concentrate wealth into dominant structures, ownership of equity in these entities offers a pathway to financial protection. The Rockefeller blueprint is not a conspiracy. It is simply the most efficient method, yet devised for organizing resources and maximizing returns on a global scale. One man saw this future 150 years ago, and we are now living within the architecture he designed. Once you perceive these structures, you can never unsee them. Explore how modern monopolies influence your daily choices. Understanding this system might change your approach to consumption and investment.